Praise the Lord. Let us continue with the analysis of the book of Nehemiah, which we started in the previous class. I hope you remember that the book was divided into two parts for the convenience study, chapters 1 to 6 and 7 to 13. The first unit, chapters 1 to 6, deals with the reconstruction of the walls, and the second part deals with the re-instruction of the people. Now, in the previous class, we have seen that the reconstruction of the walls, that unit, that chapters 1 to 6 can be again split into two. I hope you remember those small units, Nehemiah the cupbearer and Nehemiah the wall builder. In the previous class, we have covered Nehemiah the cupbearer, chapter 1 to 2:10. So, in this class, we are dealing with Nehemiah the wall builder. The portion relevant to the analysis of this part is chapter 2:11 to 6:19. Nehemiah the wall builder. Now, we have seen that he presented the matter before the king, and the king granted permission to Nehemiah to go to Jerusalem and to reconstruct the ruined walls, and he was commissioned to do it. Now, based on the commission given by the king of Persia, Nehemiah traveled back and reached Jerusalem for the reconstruction of the walls. Now, the first thing that he did after reaching Jerusalem was he made a secret survey of the ruins. Before starting the work, he made a secret survey of the ruins, and then he encouraged the people to start the building. If you go through chapter 2:11 to 20, you will get the details. Chapter 2:11 reads like this: I went to Jerusalem. Note this phrase, 2:11, I went to Jerusalem. Now 2:13 reads like this: by night I went out examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates which had been destroyed by fire. So he reached Jerusalem and first of all made an examination of the ruined walls and the gates. And chapter 3 gives us the plan and the execution of the work done by Nehemiah. Nehemiah planned it. Planning is writing future history. So he planned how to do the work, and the work was entrusted with different groups. He did not engage a mason and he did not engage some carpenters. Instead of doing that, he encouraged all people to build at the same time. To finish the work in the given time, he encouraged all the people to participate in the work, and you get all the details in chapter 3, details of the workers, details of the work done. Everything is recorded in chapter 3. I'm not going to all the details, but I can give you in a concise way who were the workers. I just now mentioned all people, but the details or the breakup of all the details is also given by Nehemiah in chapter 3. It is interesting to look into it. The work was started by the high priest. The priests joined, the Levites joined, then goldsmiths, perfume makers, merchants, businessmen, rulers, governors, temple servants, and even ordinary men. All. So all means all these classes. Priests did not abstain from working. It was started by the high priest. It was joined by the priests and Levites. Then people who were doing different other professions like smiths, especially goldsmiths, then perfume makers, merchants, businessmen, governors, rulers, temple servants, ordinary men. All of them participated in the work. Now, if you want details, you can read chapter 3 and 1, 3 and 8, 3:22, 3:26, 31 and 32. Now, these verses give you the names of these men who were doing different professions. They were all not masons, or they were not all carpenters, but people who were engaging in very many other works were willing to do that, and they all built simultaneously. They all participated wholeheartedly, and the strategy was so successful. It was so successful. So the work was immediately done, and once they started building like this, there was opposition. In spite of opposition, he completed the work in 7 weeks or in 52 days. Chapter 6 and 15 records it. So, read chapter 6 and 15. So, the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul. Elul is the 6th month in 52 days. So, the whole work was completed in 52 days on 25th of the month of Elul. And 6:16 reads like this: when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. I think you people who have joined me also will think that this is a wonder, The goldsmiths, perfume makers, priests and merchants, businessmen all building a wall, Can you imagine about that? So, it was the work of God and God's hand was behind it. So, when people around the city heard about it, they lost their self-confidence, but these people had boosted their self-confidence. Now, why they lost self-confidence? Because they realized that this work had been done with the help of God. Now, after the rebuilding of the walls, the gates were to be finished. Chapter 7 and 1 gives you details about the fixing of the gates. After the wall had been rebuilt, I had set the doors in place. Then the doors were also finished. 7:1. After the walls had been rebuilt, I set the doors in place. All was completed within 6 months of the mandate that was given by the king of Persia. The king of Persia gave a time of 6 months for completing everything, and commission was also given, and he was able to complete all the work of rebuilding the walls and setting or fixing the gates. Everything was done within the given time, that is 6 months. Now, by the way, I also want to ask you, do you know the names of the gates in the walls of Jerusalem? I was mentioning wall and gates, we have the names of all the gates in Nehemiah chapter 3. Also remember at this point of time that New Jerusalem, for which we are waiting, details about New Jerusalem are seen in the book of Revelation chapter 21, especially chapter 21, 12 to 14. Now that part gives us that New Jerusalem has also 12 gates. If so, it is better that we know at least the names of the 12 gates on the walls of Jerusalem. We have all the details in chapter 3. For your convenience, I will help you. Now, chapter 3 and 1 talks about the first gate, sheep gate. 3 and 3 talks about the second gate, fish gate. 3 and 6 talks about the third one, old gate. 3:13, the fourth one, valley gate. 3 and 14, fifth one, dung gate. 3:15, sixth gate, fountain gate. 3:26, seventh one, water gate. 3:28, the eighth gate, horse gate. 3:29, the ninth gate, east gate. 3:31, Mipkad gate. The 11th one is the corner gate, which is seen in 2 Chronicles 26 and 9, and also 2 Kings 14:13. Then the 12th one is the prison gate or Ephraim gate. Nehemiah 12 and 39 mentions about it. 8:16 also contains it. So the 12 gates are sheep gate, fish gate, old gate, valley gate, dung gate, fountain gate, water gate, horse gate, east gate, Mipkad gate, corner gate, prison gate or Ephraim gate. The corner gate also has another name, gate of Benjamin. So these are the names of the 12 gates, and that also has spiritual meaning. So it is good to know the names of the gates as well as the spiritual meaning. Now when we think of Nehemiah's success, how he was able to finish all the work in the given time, a successful leader. Now when we think about his success, we can see a blend of practical organization and spirit-led leadership. He said in chapter 4 and 9, we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat for our learning, remember, we must always blend spirituality with practical steps. Practical steps and spiritual leadership should go hand in hand, go together. So when we conclude that Nehemiah was able to complete the whole project in 6 months, some of you may think that there was no opposition, there was no enemy, etc. Don't think that there was no opposition, there was no obstruction, or there was no setbacks. I hope you remember the key thought of the book that we have fixed from 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and 9. No opportunity without opposition, and no open door without adversaries. So the door was open. King granted permission and commissioned. Everything is true, but there was opposition. There were adversaries. Opposition was there, obstruction was there, setbacks were there. Then how Nehemiah overcame all these? He had to overcome all these, and he spiritually prayed and developed plans whereby he was able to overcome all the oppositions. Now the oppositions that came to Nehemiah were from outside and inside. Now when we think about our personal life and the church life, in any spiritual circumstance, opposition will come from both outside and inside. Now it is good to categorize these two separately and analyze them at least in a very brief way. Now there were 3 kinds of oppositions for Nehemiah and his work from outside. 3 kinds of oppositions from outside, and there were hindrances from inside. Now once we consider the oppositions that came from outside, kindly note the following. First of all, there was ridicule, there was mockery, there was insult, and there was reproach. We can read about that category in chapter 4, 1 to 6. That was one group. Then secondly, enemies plotted to fight against the Jews. They stirred up trouble, and they planned all kinds of mischief, which is explained in chapter 4, 7 to 23. That is the second opposition that came from outside. And thirdly, they chalked out craftful schemes. They developed pretense, frightening plans to frighten the people. They tried to bluff, compromise. They planned treachery, and they even engaged false prophecy. Chapter 6, 12 to 14 even names a false prophetess, Novadia. These were all done by them to discredit them and to make them commit sin. Now these challenges or these oppositions are explained in chapter 6, 1 to 19. So chapter 4, 1 to 6 explains about one kind of opposition that came from outside. The second type of opposition from outside is explained in chapter 4, 7 to 23. And chapter 6, 1 to 19 explain about the third kind of challenge or opposition that came from outside. And once we think about the hindrances or challenges from inside, there are also 3 or 4 kinds of challenges that came from inside. First of all, they had to clear out all the debris of the old wall, broken down wall. I hope you remember. No, you cannot build on top of the broken down walls. First of all, you have to clear all the debris. There was so much of rubble and waste material that was to be removed. Now, we can read about that in chapter 4 and 10. Chapter 4 and 10 tells us that there was a lot of debris of the old wall, rubble and waste material, and that was to be removed. And once they started doing it, strength of the laborers went out. Strength of the laborers went out, and they got tired both physically and mentally. That was a trouble or a challenge that came up from inside. Secondly, chapter 4, 11 to 14 explains about another threat, another opposition that came from inside. In addition to the physical task of removing the debris, rubble and waste material, people were infected with fear, fear of several kinds of fear, because threat was coming from outside, and there were inimical and prophetical conspiracy going on. So people were afraid. They were stricken with fear. That is explained in chapter 4, 11 to 14. And the third kind of problem that they faced from inside is explained in chapter 5, 1 to 13. The problem of meeting basic needs. Basic needs means they needed food, food grain to eat. They needed money to buy daily needs. And some people were greedy and some people were exploiting. So that was another challenge, you know. So all kinds of problems from both outside and inside. But Nehemiah was able to win over all the opposition due to his attitude, basically. First of all, due to his attitude and the way in which he tackled all these problems, the challenges that came from outside and inside were all dealt with by Nehemiah. Now, one of the verses is very important in this context, that is chapter 6 and 11. Chapter 6 and 11 reads like this. He said, "Should a man like me run away? I will not. Should a man like me run away? I will not. Because of all these oppositions, I am not going to run away. I will stay on. I will face all the challenges and I will finish the task that is entrusted with me." Now, for example, if you read the following verses from chapter 4, we can see practical steps were taken by him. Not just praying and not just waiting on the Lord, but after praying and waiting on the Lord, he developed plans, chalked out plans. Plans, you must remember, plan is writing future history. He developed plans with God and he tackled all the problems. I am giving you actually an assignment to you. Read chapter 4, 13 to 23. Read for yourself and you will get details. But I will read the very relevant verses. Kindly read chapter 4, 13 and 14. Now it reads like this. "I stationed some people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials and the rest of the people, 'Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives and your families.'" So he encouraged the people by telling them, don't be afraid of them. Instead, what are you supposed to do? Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. So we must always depend on our great God, our awesome God, and depending on God, fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives and your homes. And again, chapter 4, 16 and 17 reads like this. "From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows and armor. Now those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other, and each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked." So they were armed while they were working, and half of the people guarded the place and half engaged in the work. So a very practical plan was chalked out by Nehemiah, and that was how he was able to complete the work. So this is what you have to remember about Nehemiah the wall builder. Now we have covered the first unit, Nehemiah the cupbearer, as well as Nehemiah the wall builder. Now in the next class, we will be taking up the second unit, that is chapter 7 to 13, how he re-instructed the people. I hope you have followed the first unit, that is chapters 1 to 6, where we see Nehemiah the cupbearer as well as Nehemiah the wall builder. Again, go through these chapters and get to know the details well. God will bless you. Thank you for your patient listening.